Some of the people... What about that one who fell down in the front there? Did he actually finish the race?
He did, remarkably. He fell 3 times. That's Captain Bennett, on a horse called Turkey Buzzard. And he fell 3 times. And another of the horses in the picture, the boar, fell twice, and the jockey broke his collarbone, but still managed to finish second.
Oh, made
so
a sterling stuff in those
race.
days. Yes. It is a beautiful action painting, isn't it? And that was what he was truly famous for.
Yes. I mean, few other artists would dare attempt to draw horses in a position like that.
Now, there is another little point on the painting which we ought to mention, and that is that he did, in fact, paint himself in quite a few times. He liked to be in on the act, as it were, Gilbert.
Yes, I think he was absolutely captivated by the world of sporting art and sport itself, and he longed almost to be a part of it. And in many of his pictures you'll find him cropping up somewhere in the background. And in fact, that figure there is Gilbert himself. The figure always with a squash hat with a black band. You can always recognise him.
When did he first start painting horses?
When he was a very young boy. In fact, his mother was a very talented amateur watercolourist, and his uncle was a famous pre-Raphaelite painter, Henry Holliday. But by the time he was at school, he was already painting horses very well. And when he did a bad Latin exam, his form master would make him draw 6 horses' heads instead of giving him lines.
But for him, that wasn't too much of a trial, was it?
No, it was very good for the Latin master, too, because he was able to form a very nice collection of early Gilbert holidays.
Well, from school, he went to the Royal Academy, where he trained.
Yes, he was trained at the Royal Academy schools and, of course, got a marvellous grounding there. And from his earliest days, he showed great independence in ignoring line and really producing his paintings by concentrating on
Let's have a look.
Well,
as regards colour, let's have a look at that magnificent one, because he then became an illustrator for the graphic magazine.
That's right.
And that is an example of his work at where was that now?
Well, that's it's called A Ticklish Moment, a frontier skirmish on the northwest frontier. And this is one of the pictures that Gilbert Holliday did actually for the graphic magazine, illustrating a contemporary event.
Beautiful pastel shades, almost unreal, though, in the desert.
Indeed. And although he never went there, I mean, it's very accurate. And I was looking at the young Winston the other day on television, and the colouring is remarkably accurate.
Yes. Now, from there, he enlisted himself for the graphic as an illustrator of the First World War, and he went off actually without a permit and so on, didn't he? He was almost arrested as a spy at one stage.
He was arrested twice as a spy, once by the British and once by the French, and he very narrowly escaped being shot.
But then he did actually join the army.
Yes, he was 35, and of course the army wasn't accepting men under 30, but he managed to wangle his age.
And one of his jobs was what was he, the forward
observation officer. That's
right.
And
this is an example of his work, the sort of thing he had to do, which is a graphic illustrator again, in a way.
That's right. He was in the Royal Field Artillery, and one of his jobs was to go forward into no man's land and produce these panorama maps showing the enemy lines.
Yes.
And this was to help the guns to lay their ammunition.
It's interesting to point out this, but he's done you can't see it very well here, obviously. He's done a spire and another spire there, but in more detail here, so that the gunners would know which was which.
Absolutely. They couldn't afford to have any mistakes, and you know, this is very much the sort of thing that they would use when they were, in fact, planning to lay the guns.
Another war picture here, beautiful illustration. This is an example of his real impressionist work, which he was good at.
Yes, his war pictures, I think, tend to be more abstract in a sense than the later ones, really for speed, for getting the thing down as fast as possible on the spot.
And let's move on to another one, talking about the speed, because that is almost a sketch of a real picture of the trenches.
Yes, that is actually done on the spot, and that's what it was like.
Fantastic. What did he use?
Everything you could possibly think of, charcoal, watercolour, even poster paint, and he'd mix all the mediums up together, pastel very often as well.
But after the war, he then was totally immersed in sport.
Yes, he concentrated more and more on sporting things, racing and hunting and polo.
That's a beautiful hunting one up there.
That's right.
Was that him on the top too?
Yes, that is Gilbert Holliday again. Again, he appears in so many of his own pictures.
It's not an egocentric kind of view of him, it's just that he wanted to be in on the scene himself. He wanted to be involved.
Right. He was a very, very modest man, and it's just that he seemed to, quite unconsciously to do it.
Yes. And such magnificent action there again.
Yes, it's not a kind of photographic depiction of the action. It doesn't freeze the movement like so many of the modern pictures do.
A much more peaceful scene here, a truly British scene of a polo match.
That's right.
Using quite a bit of colour there too.
And using, again, virtually every medium you can think of all mixed together.
Let's move to a very romantic one here. This, I believe, is him again, but who's he with there?
Well, I think it's very probably his wife, who is a very beautiful lady indeed. It could be, but he painted many beautiful girls, and they're partially modelled, I think, on his wife and partially on other people.
Magnificent light there.
That's
Beautiful
right.
pink and grey shining through, almost luminous quality to it.
But he was a marvellous man, very generous, very genial fellow, and I think you can see from these pictures that he was just as interested in the people as he was in the horses. And, you know, his love of people does come through in the work.
Yes. Well, there we are. Just briefly, we look at this one here. This is collecting seaweed on the Isle of...
On Guernsey,
that's right, where his wife came from.
And that's a marvellous action picture showing the horses thundering up the path from the beach.
Yes.
And his wife actually lived in Guernsey, and he did many, many pictures on the island.
Well, we can't finish any of his work without having another look at a racing scene. And this is the Derby.
That's the Derby, and it's rounding Tattenham Corner. And that really, I think, says everything about Gilbert